Hello, hi everyone. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to another series of the Binala Talks. Most of you or all of you are School of Archaeology students, but for the sake of the recording and for people joining us online via Zoom, the Binala Talks is a weekly seminar series or talk series hosted by the School of Archaeology, where we invite speakers from various different backgrounds, various different professions, to speak about a topic of their choice and have a lively discussion. As you can see, for those of you coming in online, our tech has been greatly upgraded thanks to the wonderful funding through the extension grant provided by OECRD. So we want to thank them every once in a while for the funding that we have, and including the free coffee for those that want in the back. Otherwise, before we begin, do we have a survey?
Yeah. We, the newest Hukai. Finally we have a print version. And we printed limited numbers, we gave it away last Friday. If you didn't get it, well, you didn't check under your seats. So sorry, but it's a very good volume. Edwin Valientes, our Ibatan, wrote a discourse on the poaching markers from Buhos Island, Batanes. Then there's a series of authors led by Emil Robles reporting on this project they have in eastern Visayas, eastern Mindanao. So, and then there's Elena Wright, her catalog, categorization of pre-contact forts in the Philippines. There's a book review, a longer version of my book review of Peter Bellwood's The First Islanders. So this is like 3 times longer than the But what's important here is that if you're an author, you get a free hard copy, at least. And having a hard copy has a different kind of kudos. I think I'm now very much convinced that that's the case, rather than just seeing your publication electronically. So I encourage you to publish in Hukai, right? This is 2019, we're catching up because of the pandemic, but eventually we already have articles lined up for the next couple of volumes. So within a year or two, we will be on time, right? Okay, so everyone's encouraged to read the latest Hukai. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Vic, for announcing the Hukai. Additionally, for those willing to submit to Hukai, you could definitely do that. I don't know the email of Hukai, but I'm sure that we could find that out if you're interested in publishing any research papers, any book reviews, as it is a peer-reviewed journal, right, Sir Vic? Hukai. So it's a nice entry and foray into publishing within the academe. If you are interested, let me know. Additionally, we also have TestPit, where that one I don't believe is peer-reviewed. But yes, it's an easier entry for publishing into the academe, and I've published myself within TestPit. So if you want any experience about knowing what it's like going through academic publishing, just talk to me. Okay, but with those announcements out of the way, I think it is only right that we introduce our speaker for today. So, Sir Jelly A. Galang is an associate professor of history at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, where he serves as the graduate program coordinator of the UP Department of History. He's also the deputy director of the UP Third World Study Center and editor-in-chief of the Chinese Studies Journal, which is the topic of today's, or at least part of today's topic. So, without further ado, Sir Jelly.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Thank you all for coming. I see some familiar faces, so maraming salamat sa invitation from the Archaeological Studies Center. My presentation this afternoon is based on my dissertation, which I did at Murdoch University in Western Australia. Matagal na, 2019 pa. So this will be an overview of my dissertation. So I hope I can generate feedback from you on how to polish the manuscript later on for publication. So my presentation this afternoon is titled Chinese Laboring Classes or Laborers and Dangerous Classes in the Philippines during the 19th century. So when we talk about the Chinese in colonial Philippines, we always tend to highlight the merchant class. Palagi yung mga komersyantes. And this is also true if we look at some of the published works on the Chinese during the Spanish colonial period, like Richard Chu's Chinese and Chinese Mestizos of Manila and Wilson's Ambition and Identity. These two books are representative of the current literature on the Chinese in colonial Philippines. Palagi ng focus ay yung mga mayaman, affluent, influential Chinese merchants and their families. I think some of the possible reasons will, number one, kasi mas madali yung sources. Mas madaming sources about this merchant classes, their families. They left a lot of documents about their families, marriage contracts, birth certificates, business transactions, networks, etc. That's one. Second is, I think, baka hindi lang masyadong interested yung mga scholars doon sa mga lower class Chinese. Okay? And number three, I think because kung meron mga existing sources, it is also possible that mahirap silang hanapin sa sources or yung access mismo doon sa documents is a challenge in itself. So, palagi na upper class, merchant class yung focus. Yung mga lower class, laboring class Chinese is always inarticulate, obscure, nameless in the historical narrative. So yun yung focus ng study ko. So instead of focusing on the mayayaman, I focus on the mahirap, especially those Chinese who were considered dangerous or undesirable. Kasi gusto ipakita na it's not true that there were a lot of Chinese who became rich during the 19th century, but majority of them came from the lower classes, especially during the 19th century. So, in my presentation this afternoon, I want to discuss the lives and circumstances of Chinese laboring classes during the 19th century. Okay? Second, I want to examine some of the factors that contributed to their journey from being laboring classes to becoming criminals or dangerous classes. And finally, I want to talk about relations that emerged between the Spanish colonial government and the Chinese criminals. Okay pa po ba o nagugutom na? The sources for my research are the bundles from the National Archives of the Philippines. I was able to open all Chinos bundles at the National Archives of the Philippines, and these documents were supplemented by materials from the Archivo Histórico Nacional in Madrid and other religious archives, Agustinians, Jesuits, Dominicans, and as well as UST archives. But I'll be focusing here on the Chinos bundles at the National Archives of the Philippines. So sa NAP, mayroong 148 bundles. Yung bundle, ganyan talaga yung tsura ng bundle. So loose documents and then naka-wrap siya ng Manila paper tapos nakatali ng straw. Ganyan siya. Okay? So 148 bundles and many of them, ako pa lang yung nag-open. So makikita nyo na very thick yung dust nung mga bundles and very brittle yung mga bundle. Yung coverage ng mga bundles mula latter part of the 18th century hanggang end of the Spanish colonial period, 1898. So here you have the title of the bundle, so Chinos Manila, and then you have the year, yung coverage na year ng mga documents. It's for instance, this is 1886 to 1889. And then here is the Spanish document section. That's the parang access code. Pag nag-request ka tayo sa library, you have to write the code. So that's the code. So 12999. Majority of the bundles are on Manila, 70%, and then 26% provinces, and then yung iba, 4% ay mga miscellaneous. Although most of the miscellaneous documents ay nakafocus din sa Manila, but they were labeled miscellaneous documents. So ito yung main source of my data. No? So ganito siya. So I used Spanish sources. No? I can read Spanish, but I cannot speak Spanish. Siguro si Sir Romel ay mas okay siya. Ako, kaya kong magbasa, but I have difficulty in speaking the language. So I'm using official documents, no, for my research. No. So maraming, doon sa 148 bundles, Chinos bundles, may iba't ibang focus yung mga bundles, but I was very interested in what the social historian, Italian historian, Carlo Ginzburg, no, yung idea niya ng archives of repression. No? Sabi niya, sa mga official documents, palagi na lumalabas yung mga lower class kapag nakakakommit sila ng crimes. So parang na-inspire ako doon. So instead of looking at the lives and circumstances of the mayayamang Chinese, I want to look at the lower class Chinese from the point of view of crime and punishment. So sabi ni Carlo Ginzburg, Italian scholar, pwede yun, and then you have to kumaga resurrect the voices of the criminals, quote unquote. No? Sa Chinos bundles, I was able to gather police dossiers, search and arrest orders, court proceedings, prison records, expulsion and deportation orders. And I was able to compile more than 5,000 individual cases covering the period from 1831 to 1898. No? So I was able to get halimbawa their names, occupations, age, residence, origin in China, their crimes, yung punishment, kasi very detailed yung mga documents. No? And from this 5,000 cases, I was able to reconstruct their collective biography. Ano ba yung buhay nila before they became quote-unquote criminals? I'm using parang criminals in quotation marks because I believe the term criminals can be defined based on who's defining it. Ibig sabihin, if from the point of view of the state, may legal, judicial definition yan. But if you read, for instance, yung mga tawag dito, yung testimonies ng mga criminals themselves, sasabihin nila, I'm not a criminal. I was a former cargador. And that's it. Hindi nila kiniklaim na criminal sila. We did not do anything wrong. We did this because we had to. We had to survive eh. Diba? May ganun silang mga reasons. So, collective biography of dangerous and undesirable classes. So, kumbaga, my research is history from below. So these classes is composed of vagrants, beggars, pickpockets, unemployed, drunkards, indocumentados, and the suspicious. And all of this were, before they became undesirable classes, they were from the laboring classes. Like ito si Corridor. Corridor is yung nagbabahay-bahay para magbenta ng tela. No? This is from the University of Michigan Digital Archives. So this is just an example para ma-feel ninyo how historians work. No? So ito yung document, no? Yung from the archival document, and this is the transcription. Hindi ko na nilagay, pero ang punto nito, this is a report from the Guardia Civil Veterana, the Urban Police of Manila in July 1877. No? Nire-report nila na meron silang na-arrest. No? They arrested one undocumented Chinese. No? Indocumentado, vagrant, and suspicious. Indocumentado, wala siyang sedula. Wala siyang documents of identification. No sedula, no nothing. No? Bago, no permanent address, roaming around aimlessly, no, sa city. Suspicioso, since he had no documents of identification, walang makapagsabi kung sino siya, ano identity niya, he was considered suspicious. No? His name, Yao Yangko. No? Naka-reside siya sa Calero, sa Tondo, ito yung importante para sa akin, no tiene oficio ni okupasyon, walang trabaho. Sin tener bienes, walang property. Que le produzca su sustento, wala man siyang wage na para sa kanyang daily needs. So this is just parang two pages lang yan, very very rich na yung information na pwedeng makuha. No? So when I was doing the profiling, very interesting kasi halimbawa, ito kunyari nasa isang bundle. Then kung anong nangyari sa kanya, nandun sa isa pang bundle. Tapos ano yung buhay niya sa Manila, nandun sa ibang bundle. So I really had to open all the bundles. Tapos interestingly, merong mga cases na yung mga, kumbaga, continuation, yung pieces of the puzzle, kumbaga, nasa Madrid. Kasi may mga petitions from the Chinese community leaders na tutulungan namin itong mga tao na to. Kaya umaabot yung mga petitions nila sa Madrid. Hindi lang makita ito, pero ito yung sample ng court proceedings. Kasi nakalagay dito, nangyari ito doon sa Casa Tribunal ng Cavite, 1892. The name of the accused was Yu Linco. Padron is the registration number, 188. Tapos nakalagay dito, halimbawa dito, preguntado, tinanong siya, he was asked, what's your name? What was your occupation? What happened to you? Tapos sasagutin niya. Tapos may tanong ulit yung nasa tribunal, sasagutin ulit niya. So makikita yung information na we need, no, to reconstruct their lives. No? So ito basically yung sources, no, na ginamit ko. And I was very fortunate that I was able to open all the bundles, and I did my research before the pandemic, no. So ngayon ang hirap nang i-access ng mga documents, no. Ako kaya pang hawakan yung physical copy of the documents. Ngayon you have to request the archives to digitize yung document that you need, tapos yung digitized copy lang yung magagamit mo. And then they do not digitize the entire bundle, parang 60 or 70%. So parang may missing pa din doon sa ibibigay nilang digitized copy sa'yo. Ako, very fortunate that I was able to get all the materials, took pictures of the materials. Until now, I have the materials. Pero bawal i-share. Nakaka-record pala tayo.
Jerry, hindi ganyan ang digitalization.
Ano na ba?
Microfilm yan.
Microfilm pala. Microfilm. Actually, pag tinignan ninyo, may mga microfilms eh. Here, may nakalagay dito, halimbawa, reel number 2. When I asked the National Archives, bakit may reel number 2? Kasi daw, noong 1960s, UP Asian Center and the Kaisa para sa Kaunlaran, yung NGO organization ng mga Chinoy sa Pilipinas, had this project of digitization, no, ng mga documents related to the Chinese. So dapat daw may kopya ang Kaisa, may kopya ang UP, and may kopya ang National Archives. When I asked the National Archives, meron daw sila but limited, and then yung reader is not compatible with the microfilm, something like that. Tapos yung Asian Center naman, nasira na, parang nag-mold. They were not able to preserve it properly. So nagkaroon ng mold, tinapon na ata ng Asian Center. So we have a catalog. Halimbawa, when you search sa internet, sa library natin, merong lalabas sa Chinos Provincias at saka Chinos Manila, nakalagay doon yung mga reels. Tapos nakalagay din yung catalog. Pero nandun yung catalog, pero yung microfilm, wala. So, very challenging yung pag-research tungkol dito. Okay, so in order for us to understand, no, yung lives and circumstances of the laboring class Chinese, we need to look at them, no, in the context of the 19th century Philippines. No? Very important yung emergence ng mga economic opportunities for the Chinese during that period, no? Especially when the galleon trade was abolished, no, in 1815. So the Philippines had to open to international trade, and then magkakaroon tayo tinatawag na cash crop economy, no? Yung agriculture-based, export-oriented economy, no? So may mga different areas in the Philippines where cash crops or agricultural crops were cultivated, no? Like abaca, tobacco, coffee, sugarcane, no? And then yung mga products na to exported outside the Philippines. And in this economic development, very important, no? Yung participation ng mga Chinese, particularly Chinese merchants in wholesale, retail, as middlemen, no? Middlemen mean to say yung mga farmers sa different areas in the Philippines, tapos may mga foreign commercial houses, halimbawa sa Manila, Cebu, Iloilo, yung mga urban commercial centers, ang nagiging middlemen, mga Chinese. So yung mga Chinese yung pupunta sa mga farmers and then dadalhin nila yan dun sa mga foreign commercial houses in Manila or dun sa mga satellite areas like Iloilo, Cebu, etc. No? And then this one, tiendas de sari-sari. This is very interesting, a phenomenon of the 19th century. Hanggang ngayon, meron pa din yung sari-sari store. But I think ito yung isa sa pinakamahalagang economic activity that was open to the Chinese during the 19th century. Kasi yung mga middlemen, may mga middlemen talaga na pupunta sa mga farmers para sila yung bibili ng mga products tapos dadalhin sa Manila. Pero meron din mga maliit na mga tiendas sa sari-sari or sari-sari stores. Parang shops lang sila sa mga far-flung areas in different parts of the Philippines na owned by Chinese store owners. No? Hihintayin lang nila yung mga farmers to bring their goods, tapos papalitan nila ng mga sari-sari. Suka, or... Kasi yung mga farmers na yan, hindi na nila kailangan pumunta sa bayan or pumunta doon sa provincial capital to get these products. Yung mga owners ng tiendas sa sari-sari, sila na yung magpo-provide sa kanila. So unti-unti ma-accumulate ng mga tiendas sa sari-sari yung mga goods from the farmers. And then dadalhin nila yan sa capital and then from the capital to Manila. No? Second, hindi lang siya economic development but related din dito yung opening of frontier areas. No? Kailangan natin ng mas maraming areas kasi kailangan para i-cultivate yung mga cash crops. No? So, pagdating ng 1850s, there was this labor question, do we need to hire additional laborers? No? Of course, dito naman palagi yung mga Filipino laborers. You have the Filipino Pulistas, yung mga forced laborers, and then you can hire additional Filipino laborers. Pero merong debate during the 1850s na what if we also import coolies? Nilay ko ba yung coolies? Mga Chinese cheap laborers. No? Kasi ito yung effect noong, di ba merong Opium War, yung first Opium War, and it was the main reason why Hong Kong became part of the British Empire. No? 1842. No? And then after that, lalakas yung coolie trade. No? Yung global trade ng mga Chinese laborers. No? Hindi lang sa Southeast Asia, kundi maging sa Australia, New Zealand, California, and other parts of the world. So in the Philippines during the mid-19th century, there was also this labor question. Do we have to depend on Filipino laborers or can we also import Chinese laborers? Para frontier areas yung mga lugar na pwede pa nilang i-clear at magtatanim ng mga cash crops. No? So ang nangyari, pagdating ng 1850s, yes, let's encourage Chinese immigration but we have to impose stricter policies. No? So yan, coolies, mga Chinese coolies, they were known, at least in Southeast Asia, for their work ethic, exceptional work ethic, labor arrangement. Ibig sabihin, kapag merong company that would want to hire Chinese coolies, hindi na siya makipag-usap isa-isa sa mga coolies, meron ng coolie broker, kumbaga, halimbawa sa Hong Kong or Macau yan or Fujian, siya yung makikipag-usap, tapos ang kausap na lang ng agent, company agent would be the coolie broker. Tapos bahala na yung coolie broker on how to get the coolies and how to bring them to the Philippines, yung residence, yung housing, etc. Mas maayos daw yung arrangement. And then, inexpensive salary compared to the Filipinos. Na from the point of view of the Spaniards, the Filipinos were numerous but they were unreliable. mayroon pang issue ng laziness, di ba? Yung indolent na, unlike the Chinese na mas madali daw mapagtrabaho. No? So magkakaroon na ng encouragement, no, ng Chinese immigration and residents in the Philippines. Actually, recent lang ito pagdating ng 19th century kasi yung readmission talaga ng mga Chinese only occurred in 1788 during the time of Governor General Jose Vasco E. Vargas. Nagkaroon ng British invasion sa Manila 1762 to 1764, no? And during the war, the Chinese sided with the British kasi the Chinese were burdened with a lot of taxes, they were exploited, etc. So when the British came, they thought, oh, the British are our saviors, so let's side with them. So nag-side sila, so ang nangyari, the Spaniards had to expel them from the Philippines after the British occupation. They were only allowed to come again pagdating ng 1788 during the time of Jose Vasco E. Vargas. The main reason is because Vasco wanted to have economic reforms in the Philippines, and one way to reform the economy was to get laborers, Chinese laborers, in addition to Filipino laborers who were already in the Philippines. So 1788, meron ng policy na bumalik yung mga Chinese pero hindi pa ganoon kadaming papasok. Papasok lang sila pagdating ng 19th century, specifically because of the 1838 and 1849 Chinese immigration decrees. No? Yung 1839 allowing the Chinese to come to the Philippines na pwede silang pumunta na sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas. They were not constricted na doon sa Manila. They could go to different parts of the Philippines. That's 1839. And then 1849, they can now get any employment na kung anong gusto nila. Although they were encouraged, no, to go into agricultural pursuits, no, pero pwede na rin silang pumasok sa iba pang mga occupations. No? So they were able to go to different provinces to migrate and establish their residence, no, sa mga provinces. Kaya pagdating ng 19th century, ito na yung official, no, second half of the 19th century, this is the official data, no, of the Chinese population, no, starting 1850 hanggang 1890. Pero kung titignan niyo, I think this is very conservative. Hindi kasama dito ang undocumented at overstaying Chinese. This is from the National Archives of the Philippines. So, imposible na by 1890 ay 45,000 lang sila. May mga ibang mga foreign observers na umaabot na sila ng 70,000, 80,000. But again, ito kasi ay based doon sa kung ano lang yung registered sa mga towns, sa mga provinces, and then ilalagay nila yan sa national. No? So this one, most of the Chinese in the Philippines, particularly during the 19th century, were Hokkien from Fujian province. No? 90-95% came from Fujian and a little portion came from Guangdong. So yung Fujian ay, kung ito yung China, ang Fujian ay dito, Guangdong is dito. Nasa taas yung Fujian at nasa baba yung Guangdong. No? Makikita natin sa mga pangalan nila. No? Usually, if it's Hokkien, ang pangalan nila is may ko sa dulo. Lim Tua Ko, Yao Yang Ko. Ganyan. Pag Cantonese naman, kadalasan, hindi naman palagi, pero kadalasan pag A. A, Tong, A, Lim, A, usually ganun. Pag walang ko sa dulo, 80% Cantonese yan, from Guangdong. During the 19th century, the Cantonese were called Macanistas. Macanista. Yeah, so they were allowed to come to the Philippines, but sabi nung mga authorities, we need to impose stricter policies on 3 areas, no? Immigration and mobility, registration, and taxation. Sige, pasok kayo, pero mas kukontrolin namin kayo. No? So immigration and mobility, kailangan merong documents of identification. So kailangan may passports from the Spanish legations in Macau, in Hong Kong, or in Amoy or Amoy, no, sa Fujian. Sa loob naman ng Pilipinas, kailangan meron silang travel permit. This is a travel permit ito ni Si Tiong Tan. No? Sa Cavite, pupunta siya ng Albay. So, pag 1891, I think ito, hindi lang makikita, but yan, kailangan nila ng travel permit. Of course, Filipinos also had to obtain these permits, pero mas stricto ang mga Espanyol sa mga Chinese. Why? Kasi very important sila sa tax. Ang mga Chinese ang nagbayad ng pinakamataas na tax sa Pilipinas during the 19th century. So, of course, Spaniards ay exempted, no? But Chinese mestizos, and then Indios, mga Filipinos, pinakamaliit yung binabayaran. So, kailangan matrace talaga ng mga authorities kung nasaan yung mga Chinese. Kasi pag nawala yung mga Chinese, walang magbabayad ng tax. So, ganyan. So, they had to secure passports coming to the Philippines. They also had to secure travel permits going from one province to another. Very strict yan. Kailangan meron pang letter from the town, tapos meron, kung Christian yung Chinese, kailangan meron pang certificate from the Cura Parroco, from the parish priest, before ka mag-issue from the provincial government, ganyan. And then, sa registration naman, kailangan i-register. Pagpasok pa lang sa Pilipinas, isulat na yung pangalan. Pangalan, name, residence, age, occupation, ano yung sinakyan na barko, etc., etc. Basta lahat ng information about the person nandoon siya sa padron. Padron General de Chinos, no? And then, yung padron na yan, hindi lang siya sa national. Meron ka sa town, meron ka sa province, at meron ka sa colony. Ganoon sila ka-stricto sa mga Chinese. But again, marami pa din yung mga illegally na nakakapasok, especially from the southern part of the Philippines. No, yung mga galing ng Labuan, Singapore, Brunei, dadaan sila ng Sulu, and then Sulu, Zamboanga, and Zamboanga to the interior parts of Mindanao, or from Zamboanga to Visayas, and then to Luzon. Now, this is, kung lang ito, names nila, occupation, tapos, ano ba ito? Yung age at saka yung mga binabayaran nilang taxes. No, parang every 3 months, every 4 months, no, meron silang ganitong census, kumbaga, na ginagawa. No? And then taxation, daming mga taxes imposed upon the Chinese. They were numerous for most of the Chinese. These taxes were very burdensome, no? Kaya napakahirap para sa kanila na magbayad. Ito, example lang din ito ng kanilang registration. Ito sa province naman. Sa bawat probinsya, this is 1881 hanggang 1892. No? So meron sila, kunyari, province. You have the province, you have the Chinos, Chinas, Minores, Reservas. Chinos ay yung mga adult male. Chinas ay mga female. Minores ay 14 years old pababa. Kasi 14 years old, hindi sila nagbabayad ng tax. No? Tapos yung mga reservas naman, sila yung mga hindi nagbabayad ng tax because of age or because of physical incapacity. No? Kasi magkano binabayaran nila, etc. na taxes. So, sa 19th century, how do we define laboring classes? There were 2 ways to define them. One is based on tax classifications. Number 2 is yung occupation nila. No? Hindi lang halata, hindi mabasa. No? But sa tax classification, before the 19th century, yung tax ay nakadepende doon sa race. So, Spaniards were exempted. No? Pinakamataas ay na taxes binabayaran ng mga Chinese mestizos, and then pinakamababang tax ay sa mga Filipinos, no? But pagdating ng 19th century, kasi ang mga Espanyol kailangan nila ng additional revenue, nagkaroon sila ng iba't ibang tax system, no? Exclusively for the Chinese. So 1828, 1852, 1889 tax system. So ito ay 1828 tax system, no, sa mga Chinese. So here you can see there were 4 tax categories, no? 1, 2, 3, 4, yung mga purple, no? So first class is 10 pesos per month ang binabayaran. Usually ito yung mga wholesale merchants. Second class is 4 pesos per month. No, retail traders with clothing stores, retail traders of silk with stores, ganyan. Ito ang nasa ka. And then third class is 2 pesos per month, and then fourth class is 1 peso per month. So in this 1828 tax system, laboring classes occupy the third and the fourth tax classification. Yung first two, yan yung mga mayayaman. Na meron silang sariling stores, wholesale and retail stores. No? This was 1889 naman ito, yung Cedula de Capitación Personal. No? Babaguhin niya ng mga Espanyol kasi sa tingin nila na kung mas naging diverse yung occupation na nakuha ng mga Chinese, baguhin natin tapos dagdagan natin ng tax ulit. Baguhin natin, dagdagan ulit natin. So, dito ang laboring class based doon sa Cedula de Capitación Personal ay yung 6th. All adult males not included in the first 5. Ito yung kasi yung first 5 ay mga merchant class ito. Or employees of the self-employed shop owners, professional, yan. And then women, Chinese women, yan. So ito naman ay hindi sila nagbabayad ng 8 at saka 9. Ang example ng Cedula de Capitación Personal, yan. Nakalagay for instance, hindi lang kasi halata, but this is Cavite, Silang sa Cavite, tapos nakalagay yung pangalan niya, kung saan siya galing, kunyari Lamua, Infugen, ano yung trabaho niya, jornalero, wage laborer, bachelor ba siya, soltero, ganyan. Tapos magkano yung binabayaran niya. Tapos, yan. So iba-iba, kung depende kung ano yung tax classification mo. This is 6th tax classification, so ang color niya ay yellow. So kapag yung iba naman, higher, pink or green, ganyan. So yan, occupation naman, so number 1 is tax classification, number 2 is occupation. No? So kadalasan, ang type of occupation nila is manual, of course, temporary, low paying. Most of the cases, pwedeng nag-work yung isang individual Chinese na sarili niya or under an employer. No? Mas secure in a way kapag meron kang employer, no? Parang meron kang ahente or kabisilya, no, ang tawag nila. Pag individual work, mas mahirap makipag-connect doon sa community. This one, establishment of gremios or occupational guilds. Kapag mga, kunyari, cargador, meron silang gremios de chinos cargadores, kunyari. So kapag may issue sila, pag-usapan nila doon sa guild nila and they would forward yung issue sa authorities. Okay pa po ba kayo? Mabilisan na lang, no? Okay, so ang ginawa ko, I'm looking at the laboring classes, pero ang materials ko ay criminal records. So kumaga pabaliktad ako. So instead of crime to regular laboring classes, binaliktad ko yung history nila. Kumbaga, nag-start ako sa pagiging laborers nila, papunta doon sa pagiging criminals nila. Kasi pwede naman yun kasi you have the documents, no? So, ano yung reasons nila bakit sila naging quote-unquote criminals, heavy taxation? They were required to register. Pag nag-register sila, kaya nang i-track ng mga Espanyol saan sila nakatira at pag nakatrack, they had to pay taxes. Legal and extra-legal taxes. Okay? Nature of work, temporary and very small salary. No? Sabi ng marami sa kanila, no available work, especially during the rainy season. Lalo na kapag nasa labas sila. No? Especially during the 1880s, nagkaroon economic depression sa Pilipinas, marami ang walang trabaho. Filipinos and Chinese laborers, mahirap ang trabaho. So, nagkakaroon ng competition between Filipino laborers and Chinese laborers. Madalas na ang walang trabaho ay mga Chinese. And old age, no? Kahit old ka na, kailangan pa rin magbayad. May exemption, pero kasi may mga instances na pagbabayarin pa rin sila. Kung hindi ay i-intimidate sila ng mga authorities. Ang result, since they were not able to pay their masyadong mataas yung mga taxes, they were not able to pay their taxes. Marami ang no permanent address, so paikot-ikot sila, no? Vagrancy. Move from one place to another to look for employment. Many of them lived in abandoned buildings and markets, no, waiting for people to give them employment. Many of them nagkaroon ng vices, mga bisyo, drinking, opium use, opium addiction. Kaya pagdating na ng mga Amerikano, very serious, no, na concern yung opium addiction among the Chinese, no. Begging, no, and then of course they were arrested by the authorities. Forms of punishment, there were 4 forms of punishment, no, na ginamit. Kailangan magbayad ng fine. Wala ka namang pambayad ng tax mo, pagbabayarin ka pa ng fine. No? So, bayad ka ng tax mo, tax arrears plus fine. So, what the Chinese would do was to get guarantors from the Chinese community. Yung makakilala nilang mayayamang Chinese, baka pwede kayong maging fiadores of guarantor ko na babayaran ko yan. Just give me some time to work and then to get money. Then, yung properties, kung meron man silang property, na kadalasan wala, kino-confiscate. No? Number 2 is imprisonment, no? Usually provincial prisons, or kapag serious or masyadong mataas yung tax arrears sa bilibid prison sila dinadala. Okay? And then ginagamit din sila bilang convict laborers, no? They were called forzados. No? Kadalasan kapag mga minor crimes like pickpocketing, kunwari, kumuha siya ng damit kasi wala daw siyang damit, ganyan. Or kumuha siya ng tinapay kasi gutom na siya. Yung mga ganun, usually 3 months sa bilibid, and then after that, i-release na sila. Number 3 is deportation, 1837 to 1882. Deportation meaning within the Philippines. No? So, to frontier areas, the idea is for them to be used as pioneer settlers. No? Habang pinapunish sila dun sa mga crimes sila, nagamit sila ng colonial government para i-develop yung agriculture ng mga areas. Like marami ay pinatapon sa Palawan, halimbawa, marami pinatapon sa Cotabato, marami pinatapon sa Cagayan. Why Cagayan? Cagayan, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya. Why? Tobacco monopoly. Yung may and then Palawan is frontier area. Cotabato naman is dito, magtatayo ng mga military installations. Kasi nga, nandyan yung mga Muslims. And then, finally, expulsion. Yung mga hindi na daw talaga kayang mabago ng pagiging convict labor, sabi na i-expel na lang natin. So, marami ang in-expel na Chinese criminals from the laboring classes mula 1883 hanggang 1898. Interestingly, ang nagbibigay ng recommendation to expel these Chinese ay galing sa Gobernador Silio de Sanglias, the highest representative of the Chinese community in Manila, and then their community leaders. So pag nirecommend ka na i-expel from the Philippines, that means wala na talagang pag-asa. No? So this, and then magdadagdag ang colonial government ng additional taxes to use, no, para i-expel kasi magbabayad ng ship, no, to transport yung mga nasa Manila pabalik ng China. So ito, nakalagay dito, isang document ito, nakalagay yung dates, tapos ano yung ship na sinakyan nila, anong klase ng ship, kung English, Japanese ship, tapos kung ilan yung nakasakay doon sa ship na iibabalik o i-expel sa China. So in conclusion, I think it's important to note that the Chinese laboring classes played a vital role in the colonial economy of the Philippines during the 19th century. However, they were severely affected by the measures imposed upon them by the Spanish colonial government, especially in relation to immigration, mobility, registration, and taxation. Okay? These laboring classes, especially those who were not able to pay their taxes, did not register, did not possess any documents of identification, were considered dangerous and undesirable and criminals because they posed a serious threat to the physical, political and financial well-being of the Philippines. No? A collective biography of this laboring class Chinese presents another facet, no, of the Chinese community in the Spanish Philippines. So it's my small contribution to understanding and appreciating the Chinese community in the Philippines. Na hindi lang palagi sila yung mayaman. Marami sa kanila yung galing sa mahirap at marami sa kanila ay pinaalis pa sa Pilipinas. Yun lang po. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Sir Jelly, for that really interesting talk about, one of the lesser known aspects of Chinese culture throughout the Spanish era of the Philippines. Now, I think we'll open the floor up to questions. If anyone has any questions, comments, feel free to ask questions. I think Sir Vic was first.
Fascinating and impressive that you open all those bundles and you're still alive. Well, my first question is, do you have a sense of what percent of any given, what do you call this, census are the working classes in the total recorded population of the Chinese? Maybe in 1850s or 1890s. Do you have a sense of that? In, second, sige, while you're chewing on that, did you have to return the bundles in those Manila papers afterwards? Did you have to do that? Yeah. O sige, you reply first to the first question.
Yung first, yung pinaka-clear would be 85 to 90% of the Chinese in the Philippines during the 1870s and 1880s came from the laboring classes, at least from the 6 tax classification. So 80 to 85%. So marami din mayaman, pero majority 1870s, 1880s came from the laboring classes, or 6 tax classification.
Did the Chinese community invent the concept of tiendas de sari-sari store, or did they just dominate it? What do you think?
Kasi sa mga probinsya merong mga tianggi at merong mga parang weekly markets eh.
Tabo.
But pero hindi siya yung permanent na shop. No? For the Chinese kasi kailangan nila magstay to know the culture, to know the language, to get to know the people. So unlike dun sa mga rotating markets or weekly markets na talagang nangyari sa Philippines, I think na sila nagsimula
Ganda siguro tingnan pa, no?
I'll be presenting a paper in Adhika next year about tiendas sa sari-sari.
Oh.
Mababago lang ito na magdo-dominate lang ang tiendas sa sari-sari ng mga Filipinas pagdating ng 1950s because of the retail nationalization law. 1952.
Ang ganda ng conversion into English. Sari-sari store.
Tiendas
Rather
sa
than
sari.
Tiendas de sari.
Tiendas sa sari-sari.
Galing.
Variety store. Variety store. Yung second, sir, what is it? Return the bundles?
No, yes. When you, so you went to the archives, one of those last few lucky researchers who managed to handle that's a big issue about access. No? But were you required to return it in the Manila paper?
Yeah.
And tie it up again?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, kaya kailangan dahan-dahan. Hindi pwedeng kung ano lang yung So, kapag kunyari ito yung paper mo, ito yung bundle mo, the first page should be like that. Kasi pag binalik mo na, kailangan para yung first page mo, yun pa din kasi hindi lang halata eh, but may mga pages siya, sir eh.
It looks
Meron siyang pages. Loose document siya, pero may page number sila. This one is S235. So kapag kung ano lang yung naisip mo na, hindi pwedeng ganun. Mawawala yung kwento. Although, may mga times talaga na walang kwento, ikaw yung bubuo ng kwento, but meron kang susundan na page number. So kailangan first page, second page, and then pag natapos mo na, para nandun pa din yung...
Let me just comment, with microfilm, unfortunately, they don't last most of the time because they are not kept well. For instance, I looked at microfilm back in the late 80s, no? And then went back to almost 3 decades after in the UP library. The same microfilm, almost, you cannot read it anymore. So bad, so it doesn't last. No? Unlike microfiche, microfiche. Very good.
I was very fortunate, sir, because I was allowed to take photos of the documents.
Yeah, so nothing beats that. No? Nothing beats that.
Kasi now you cannot you cannot touch the physical copy.
I think the history community should protest. Should protest.
And the,
Like the Chinese did, and then you get expelled. Many more questions from that others.
Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. So, considering the social conditions that the lower class are living in, there's widespread mendicancy, lots of beggars, probably lots of substance abuse as well. Were there efforts by the Spanish government or the Chinese elite or anyone for that matter to alleviate these social conditions, like parang mini manifestation ng DSWD? Were there records of that back then?
the Spanish colonial government did not have any unit or agency, no, that addressed this concern. Ang mas pa ay yung Chinese community. Meron sila, they had this Gremio de Chinos, parang parang NGO, parang non-government organization, that the idea is to help their poor compatriots, no? And then meron ka ding mga gremios nga, gremios, yung mga occupational guilds, and then merong mga clan associations, clan and village associations. So if you came from the same clan in China, usually meron kay ancestral house or temple sa Manila kunyari, and then you can ask help from your clanmen or something like that, no? So mas ang help ay galing sa Chinese community, hindi siya galing sa government, no? Mas ma-develop yung assistance from the Chinese community pagdating ng 1880s. Kasi 1880s nagkaroon ng anti-Chinese campaign in the Philippines. Kasi nga, because of the economic depression, maraming walang trabaho, tapos maraming vandalism sa mga Chinese properties, maraming mga attacks, no, na ginagawa sa mga Chinese. The Chinese had to strengthen, no, yung community solidarity nila, and also during the 1880s, they sought help from the Qing government in China. Sabi nila, magpadala kayo dito ng authorities niyo para tignan yung conditions namin. And nangyari ito 1886, yun yung Wang Yu Commission, no, from China. Hindi lang Manila pero other parts of Southeast Asia and Australia para tignan ano yung nangyayari sa mga overseas Chinese. And one of the main reason also was for them to establish consulates, Chinese 1880s ito nangyari. But in the case of the Philippines, yung Chinese consulate was only established in 1899, American colonial period na. Pero as early as 1880s, 1885, 1886, meron ng petitions yung mga rich Chinese in Manila to come, punta kayo dito, tignan nyo yung nangyayari sa amin. We were being exploited here, samantalang ang dami naming nakocontribute sa Pilipinas. 1880s. Mas lumakas yung Chinese community, solidarity, group identity.
Jerry, when was the last Chinese revolt?
Chinese revolt, yun, 1762,
So that was the
1764.
last, right? So after that, there was no more, no?
No more, pero meron pa sir yung cholera epidemic, 1820.
Oh, yeah, that was major.
Pero hindi naman siya
Halo-halo
focus on the
na yun.
Chinese. Hindi siya focus sa mga Chinese, pero more on foreigners in general.
You know, I also like Carlo Ginzburg and read him, and I like that you were inspired by that archives of repression. But just listening to this talk, I was wondering, could you, did you manage to bring out in your full writing the response of these individuals, or in other words, did you manage to fashion individuals out of the archives? Of course, you gave us a big, wonderful macro, no? But you didn't have a case study, right? The closest one was that fellow, no? The one with the name, that was without permanent address, without even an age or birthday. But in the process of your research, you managed to bring out a lot of agents out of the archives. And could you tell us what's your insight out of that?
Yeah, hindi ko na diniscuss dito, sir, but I was able to include in my research a lot of case studies. No, like there's one Chinese, based on the court proceedings, there's one Chinese who was arrested in, this was 1891, 1892. He was arrested in Dolores, Quezon, no, for being undocumented. So, kwinento niya na I was from San Pablo, Laguna, kaya lang walang masyadong employment sa San Pablo, Laguna. I went to Dolores, Quezon, and then with some of my compatriots, they knew that the Guardia Civiles will be coming, so they hid sa Mount Banahaw. Meron akong isang chapter doon sa dissertation on flight and freedom. So may mga nagtago sa Arayat, sa Pampanga, may nagtago sa Cuyapu, yung mga mountains sa Cuyapu, sa Mount Banahaw, nagtago sila. So may agency sila na alam nila kung kailan dadating Guardia Civil, saan sila magtatago. And yung specific na Chinese na to, very interesting because the file was very thick, like 40 pages yung file niya. Kasi there was even an attempt to fool the authorities. Kasi meron siyang sedula, dekapitasyon. Pero when he was asked, what's your name? Iba yung sinabi niya doon sa dala niyang sedula. Tapos when he was asked during his trial, why did that happen? Sabi niya, I was confused. I did not understand what the Guardia Civil asked me. So, and then we were trying to skip. So, when you asked me, I thought you were asking me about my friend. That's why, ganon. So, may agency. Very interesting, very interesting.
It's also interesting in the lineup of descriptions of dangerous classes. You said, all sorts, right? Vagrants, But what's lacking are those categories of bandido, ladrones, turisan, no? That fellow that you just mentioned, he wasn't categorized as a turisan, or
In the archival documents, they were not provided.
So the Chinese dangerous class, they don't overlap, no? In the definition. Interesting.
Pero very interesting then the way that the Spanish colonial government conducted manhunt operations. Like may isa lang na nawala doon sa padron, like kasi regular yung pagkuha nila ng census, ng registration. May isa lang na hindi nila mahanap. They would write, kunyari sa isang town, they would write all the town mayors, the gobernadorcillos. At pag hindi nahanap, susulatan nila yung mga provincial heads, mga alcaldes mayores. And then pag wala talaga, they will ask Manila. Baka kasi bumalik ng Manila. Kasi from Manila, they would go to different provinces eh. Pag wala talaga, madaming layers, very complex. So in this research, I also learned that, kasi sila sabi naman sa historiography na hindi na ganoon kalakas yung government, parang humihina yung government. Pero here you can see very complex yung process nila of registration, of finding itong mga fugitives na ito. Kahit isa lang, pwede lang padalhan lahat ng mga surrounding provinces. Tapos each provinces meron din sila mga quadrilleros.
So, your 5,145 cases, how many are repeat? I mean, so because you went through all of that, right? Are there a lot of names that, so when you say cases, per case, different individuals?
Different individuals.
Wow.
Different individuals.
That's
So
a lot.
yung dissertation ko, parang less than half ay yung cases. Kasi I put everything. Sabi ng supervisor ko, you have to put everything kasi there has to be like numerical name. So, when you access my dissertation, nandun lahat. Yung bundle number, yung access, yung number ng bundle, yung name, yung age, occupation, what happened to them, etc. Nandun lahat siya. Kaya medyo makapal yung
And does it include those who chose to be Christianized, change
Yeah.
their names?
Yeah. So, nandun din. May mga
So how did they know they're Chinese? Let's say
nakalagay. Chino-Cristiano. Chino-Cristiano. And then, dun sa name nila, usually Mariano Tan Tangko. Ganyan. So, you have Mariano or Juan Ongko, something like that. So, they have the Christian name and the Chinese name. Very challenging yung archival work, but fulfilling ang archival work.
My question is, how does the death penalty figure in the Chinese community?
Wala akong nakitang death penalty. Yan lang, fine, forced labor, deportation, and expulsion. I think it's because of the Chinese community leaders' efforts to, in a way, protect their countrymen. Like, kung hindi na talaga kaya na i-reform itong mga criminals na to, expel na lang instead of killing them. Something like that.
Kasi yung mga Indio may garoten.
May garo.
But then I guess a sort of follow-up question to that. If they were eventually expulsed and then returned back to China, were there ever consequences? Like, again, if like they do a very serious crime, would they ever be then killed in China?
That I do not know. I don't
Okay.
have data on that. Pero the data I have is that many of them would come back to the Philippines.
Okay, I see.
There were
I see.
reports na hindi sila dumadating sila sa port ng China, pero they would stay for a few days in China, in Fujian, Macau, or Hong Kong, and then they would ride again yung mga ships going back to the Philippines. Hindi na dun sa mga ports na legal ports of entry, pero dun sa mga illegal ports na like Cagayan kunyari, or Sulu, Zamboanga, Palawan area. Yung mga areas where Spanish control is very, very weak.
Who collects the tax? Someone from the community or
Yeah, meron silang
Indio?
meron silang 1880s, they had this Tenientes Mayores de Chinos. Sa mga provinces with at least 200 registered Chinese, they were allowed to select one teniente, parang head ng Chinese community, provincial Chinese community. And then one of the functions of the Teniente Mayor de Chino was to collect taxes from the Chinese in that province.
Do they collect back taxes? Let's say you escape, right? And then later on, nahuli ka ulit, di ba, sa Binondo. Do they, may back taxes ka, do you have to pay that?
May tax arrears,
May
plus
arrears.
fine, plus interest.
And what, let's say you move to San Pablo, right? Laguna. They're fresh, right? So they won't ask you if you pay tax from where you came
No,
from?
they will check. They will check kung nagbayad ba to sa San Pablo. Pag hindi nagbayad, yung arrear mo dito plus yung current mo sa Dolores,
Plus,
Quezon, yeah.
Plus
have to pay.
punishment.
Kasi nga, the Spanish colonial government viewed the Chinese as main source of revenue. Pag nakikita palaging may isang part na Cedula de Capitación Personal de Chinos. Kaya during the revolution, for instance, yan, milking cow din ng mga revolutionaries ang mga Chinese.
In fact, they were the number one victims in the insurrection.
Maybe if anyone has any final questions, now would be the time, because we are sort of coming up on time. Let me just... There we go. Because if not, I think this would be a perfect place to end it here. So again, thank you to our speakers for today, for Jelly. And yeah, for the next Binalot, I don't know... Oh. Yes, so... Digital Morning, the one of the Binalot talks that we had postponed.
Lamay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna happen here next week, same time. But again, if you need the reminder, we'll be posting it on the Binala Talks page through email, usual channels. So thank you everyone for coming today.
Thank you.